In this third and final discussion on fiscal policy, we will take a look at how tax revenues can either be in a surplus or a deficit condition depending upon the level of national productivity. And we'll also discuss some of the key problems with relying on fiscal policy as a method for the government to influence the economy. This chart shows a comparison of government spending versus tax revenues, and as you can see, as national productivity increases, tax revenues obviously will go up. At this point in the chart, tax revenues exceed the level of government spending, therefore a surplus in the budget occurs. At this point in the chart, though, we can see that government spending is in excess of tax revenues. Oftentimes, this is a political argument to say that government spending is perhaps out of control, when in fact, if you look at the graph, you can see where if national productivity, if gross domestic product has fallen, as it does during times of recession, you can very easily go from a point of equilibrium, government spending is equal to tax revenues, and you can fall into a deficit very quickly. When we fall into a deficit, whether with our own personal finances or as a government, we've already discussed the option of borrowing. That is, the government could sell bonds in order to raise money for its programs, and therefore cover the difference between government spending programs versus the shortfall in tax revenues that is coming in. We've already talked to one of the key problems with relying on fiscal policy, and in this regard, the crowding out effect, and how that comes into play with the selling of bonds, government getting into the bond market. There are several other problems that can occur with relying on fiscal policy to help correct an economic situation, and we're going to take a look at 3 of those. When economic conditions change, it takes time for people to recognize that there is a decline that's occurring. At this point in the chart, in the graph that you see, the people have recognized it and are saying, hey, we need some help here. We've got a recession going on. It then takes further time for the leadership of the government to concur with that conclusion and decide that action needs to be taken. This is what we refer to as a recognition lag. The amount of time that it takes for the population to say, hey, we have some serious problems here, and then the further amount of time that it takes for the political leadership to say, hey, you're right, and we need to do something about that. Once the political leadership decides that action is appropriate and that a fiscal policy needs to be undertaken to help correct the economic situation, it takes even further time for the appropriate bills to be reviewed and passed before the legislature, so that the dollars can be appropriated for various projects. In previous years, you may have heard reference to shovel-ready projects, and that was with the intention that as soon as a bill could be passed, that as soon as money could be appropriated to a project, that work could begin on that project immediately. That was meant to minimize the administrative lag. And even after the funds have been allocated to specific projects, it takes even more time for the offices of the executive branch of government to get the people in place, hire people in some instances, purchase equipment that's necessary, and get the resources together to actually make that project happen. And for all those funds that are then authorized and being spent, it takes further time for that money to have an impact upon the economy, simply because there are logistical issues, there are organizational and leadership issues that have to be resolved in order to get the project truly underway. And so you have an operational lag. And so as you can see, with the lag in time required to recognize the problem, the further amount of time taken to get the funds allocated to the project through the administration of government, and the further amount of time that it takes to organize the project and put the people and the resources in place to make the project happen, by that point the economy can actually be in a recovery phase already. As you get ready for the exam, you may want to focus upon three particular points from our discussions on fiscal policy. First is to know the use of government spending and taxation depending upon the economic conditions. Second is to understand the role of government borrowing, and in particular the crowding out effect that it can have on the bond market. And third is to be able to understand and communicate the problems with fiscal policy. Those three issues, particularly the time lag issues that occur with fiscal policy. Review those things and carry those in with your exam tomorrow, and you'll do well.